god, I've been waiting for this moment. No, not some clarity on who Reg could potentially be, not the insanely good cliffhanger that left manga readers waiting months to get some closure on, hell, not even the confirmation that the sages are behind the existence of Iraburu, but instead, inevitable proof that Veiko is, without question, the best girl in Made in Abyss, period. God, I simp for this woman. Hello everyone, welcome to another Made in Abyss episode review. Today we'll be talking about Season 2, Episode 5, Concealment. So there is a few things to talk about in this episode, but to be perfectly honest, this review will mostly favour anime onlys. There isn't actually much deviation from the manga outside of the narrative order of the events, and some small details that were cut to help expand the world of Iraburu. But there are still some things worth mentioning. I think this episode in particular is what really starts to get the wheels turning. These moments are all building up for something quite insane down the line. I'm just, so keen to see the way the internet will react to future episodes. Now before I begin the review, I just want to say a few things regarding these reviews from now on. In case you didn't know, my last review was blocked worldwide due to the use of copyrighted content, which in actuality just meant using clips that span out more than 5 seconds at a time. I don't want to be petty, but there are people who have re-uploaded entire sequences to this platform, but it's cool. No, I get it, Kodokawa. From now on, these videos will feature a lot more of the manga visuals as well as the anime to help ensure that these videos have a place to stay on this platform. Honestly, wrestling with Kodokawa felt like, god man, here's an example. That's me, and that gun is symbolic of the 30 counts of timestamps that I had to remove from my last video, which by the way, is still growing as we speak. And this is that review. Needless to say, I still haven't been able to recover that episode, but thank you all for the support on it. But that's enough of that, let's get into the manga comparison. So right off the cuff, we actually have a unique change from the manga. From a timeline perspective, this is actually moments after from when the last episode ended, whilst in the manga, the sequence isn't actually until the very end of chapter 43, and the scene after it's actually in the middle of chapter 44. I like this choice because again, it allows for our stories to play out together, rather than separately. It just makes this show a bit easier to follow. We then trace back in the manga a few pages and play out Reg and the Mechanical Dolls sequence, which is basically the exact same in the manga. This episode's order is super unique though, much like the last. It uses the remainder of chapter 43 to showcase Reg's sequence, and then the start of chapter 44 to continue his journey back to the village with the interference unit, and then it picks up from the middle of the same chapter from where Riko was introduced to Wazakun in the Narahade restaurant. It then finishes the remainder of that chapter and the entirety of chapter 45. So we're still averaging about 2 chapters worth of content per episode. In terms of narrative structure, that is about it though. So let's get into the cuts. Now nothing major is cut, but there are some interesting details that have been left out. First and foremost, one of the smaller things, one of the creatures running away from the Ryu Sazai thankfully didn't experience this brutalization like it did in the manga, so round of applause to this little guy. Also, when Riko and Wazakun are conversing about Riko being a cave raider, Wazakun gives her a high five, but in the manga it's so forceful that it actually forces her back a bit and leaves her hand shaking on impact. It's a cute little detail that was cut out. Also, can I just say, I could watch Wazakun eat food for fucking hours, dude. He's such a goddamn bro, and his yay just filled me with so much unfathomable joy. I've been waiting so long to hear him say it. I love these characters a little too much, I know, but still, it's just, it's so nice seeing it realized. Also in the manga, after Wazakun leaves, Riko goes in for another bite of her French cuisine, and it's still a little hot for her to handle. Small detail that was cut out for the sake of time, I guess. During the learning sequence as well, because this character has such a strong grasp on the language, Riko actually asks if they know what Marsan is saying. And she actually has no clue, which implies that Marsan just kind of vibes and says unintelligible things. God, I love her so much. Another thing that was cut during this moment was a deeper breakdown into the language. The manga has this one-page panel that explains a whole bunch of words that weren't explained in the anime, but it makes total sense considering 2 factors. First and foremost, the obvious, there is a lot of exposition here that would just stole the anime's runtime, and number 2, the anime and the manga are exploring the Narahade language very differently. The anime actually provides active subtitles, whilst the manga sometimes does and sometimes doesn't. I will say personally, I prefer that to the anime in that regard. I quite liked compiling my own notes when reading the manga, so that when dialogue is used in that language in later chapters, I'm given the chance to decode what's being said myself. But hey, this is an anime, not a book study, so I totally understand. Just a personal preference. Also, feel free to pause on this screen if you're interested in the dialogue. Another detail that was cut is how Riko actually obtained the delving helmet. This is actually an older version of the one she had before it was stolen by the villagers. She happened to barter for this one from the same Narahade we met in episode 3. I liked how the manga references this, as when we are first introduced to Naruhade, Riko actually acknowledges that the equipment that they are selling are old cave raiding tools. Akihiro, man, he leaves no stone unturned. The manga also outlines the very clothing Riko managed to purchase for Veiko using her value. While it was likely cut for the same reason, it's an interesting detail nonetheless. I also love how her headpiece is just a set of pants for a four-legged Naruhade. And, you know, she makes it work, considering the queen that she is. But in terms of manga differences, that's really it. Not as much compared to last time. And so now, let's talk about the anime episode itself, because this is where the real meat is. Let's go through a pretty detailed synopsis of the episode. So Reg has completely lost his way back to the village because of the Ryu Sazai that's been chasing him around, and there is no Amigurumi to follow. The persistent creature pursues Reg out of its territory and manages to chip one of his arms in the process. Reg is saved by the giant mechanical doll we saw earlier. One thing to note, by the way, is that it also has the same symbol on its body that was present on the letter in episode 2. An interesting detail that, as per usual, has some kind of merit to consider. The mechanical doll assists Reg back to the village, and through their exchange, Reg learns that this being is known as an interference unit. These are apparently robotic entities that are assigned to a layer and share the same creator. Their job is merely to touch and experience the abyss and record its findings. The rule of these beings, however, is that they cannot traverse different layers, but somehow Reg is an exception, as it clearly knew Fupuda in this layer, as it's evident from the line, meaning that he has been in the 5th layer before and managed to make it all the way back to the 1st. The implication of all this is that Reg and this interference unit either share different creators, or that Reg was specifically designed to break that rule of being locked into a layer. We cut back to Wazuki and Riko, who are enjoying their meals, and we learn that the 3 sages are the people behind the creation of this village. One amazingly animated eating sequence, and a yay that soothes the soul later. Riko asks the restaurant owner to teach her the language of Iroburu and about the potential location of Reg and Nanachi. They lead her to a place in the village known as Dogapu, which is almost completely inaccessible to the Naruhade trapped inside the village, as it causes them an incredible amount of pain, much like the Curse of the Abyss. It's in this place that we encounter Veiko, one of the 3 sages. She exclaims that she knows Nanachi's whereabouts due to the signals of the village, but not Reg, as he clearly resides outside of Iroburu at the moment. She's willing to take Riko to Nanachi, but she is trapped in this chasm. Riko then frees her immediately because she fears a repeat of what happened at the Ida front arc when they were all separated. They venture to the village, pick up some sick drip, and then Riko notices there is a lot more activity regarding the village's inhabitants. Veiko briefly mentions it could be part of something called the Luring. After a bit of walking, they reach Belaf's domain, and Veiko waits outside, as her existence in the village could potentially lead to problems if discovered and recognized by others outside of Dogapu. Inside the home, Nanachi and Midi reside sound asleep. Belaf and his towering presence elapses the entire room, and he asks what it is that Riko is after. Riko, wanting to retrieve Nanachi, is met with the unfortunate news that Nanachi used herself as compensation to buy Midi from Belaf, who had been using her for sustenance because she is, as stated in Season 1, an endless supply of energy because she is an immortal being. Majikaja-san feels guilty for bringing Nanachi to this place like the precious dumpling he is, and then Belaf breaks down the situation for Riko. The Midi here isn't the exact same Midi that Bondrewd had brought down, but still technically is. You see, Belaf wanted Midi, but Bondrewd never sold her off, so in order to achieve their goal of obtaining her, they used their own libs and organs as compensation to perfectly recreate a Midi into the village. Everything is copied, including the soul. Think of it as a Midi from a very particular point in time, if that makes it easier to understand, though not 100% accurate. So Riko, out of desperation, decides to barter with Belaf to buy them both, but Belaf can only give so much leeway. He will only settle for both of Riko's eyes, both of her legs, or half of her innards. And then the episode ends. Good. Episode, honestly, Kinema Citrus handled this super well as per usual. Digital landscape shots were fantastic as always, and Kevin's music really took lead in this episode. It was quite surprising. It was really great to hear some new tracks as well as some old ones. The train is officially charging down the tracks of despair, and will eventually stop at Eldritch Body Horror Mountain. There is just so much to like about this episode, to be honest. I think the exchange between Reg and the Ryu Sazai was handled quite well. It really showcased just how powerful these turbine dragons actually are. According to the manga, they are considered the rulers of this outer domain, and you can clearly see why. Not only do they have a strong foresight like the Orb Piercer, but they are towering in comparison, with long-range capabilities and insane strength for close combat. I also think the explanation of Reg's potential origins is super well done in the anime. As mentioned in the previous part of this review, he is identified as having resemblance to entities called interference units like this guy, the only exception being that Reg can seemingly traverse different layers, while others are assigned to one place. It just makes you question who created the interference units and why is Reg, an Obade, bearing so much similarity to them? Are their creators truly the same? Like, I love that we're given so many more questions and answers with this series, but we aren't drained by it. Like, name a better anime for theory crafting. I'll fucking wait. But what I loved most about it was just how they properly showcased how much Riko as a character has grown, and why she truly is deserving of team leader. Riko at the start of the series comes across as incredibly naive, and despite having an extensive knowledge of the Abyss, is incredibly carefree, and as a result, is a bit too reckless. This episode, however, really portrays her growth. While yes, the last episode proved that she is still a little too trusting of strangers sometimes, her ability to adapt and take charge are really showing in this episode. And honestly, it will only grow from this point. I really like in particular this scene. While the manga portrayed this moment better in my opinion, the gravity of the exchange still translates to the anime really well. In particular, Riko saving Veiko, not caring if she could potentially be a bad person in order to save her friends. I love that she is so focused on her goals, and the people closest to her. It's so fitting for her character. It just feels like she bears similarity to her mother in that regard, but still is her own independent person. And a core theme of this series is, when it comes to being a leader, sometimes you have to make hard decisions, even at the expense of others. And I think this is a great way to kind of sprinkle that idea in mind. That being said, you can trust Veiko. She's an absolute queen. I love her so much. And actually, on the topic of Veiko, god damn, dude, like, I don't drop tier 3 Twitch subscriptions at all, but for her, she can have 10 of them. Her adaptation has been fantastic so far. The Seiyu really captured her awkwardness and timid personality so much, and the animation for her has been, chef's kiss. I think again, by having parts of her past play out beforehand, it does limit the surprise of a human being here in this layer. The manga was an incredibly shocking moment in the series, but that being said, the anime has done an overall better job at telling the story. I think it's more than fine to make this sacrifice for the sake of the storyline. Because with all this prior knowledge, it makes you wonder what the Ganja Corps went through when it came to creating this village. What led up to its circumstances. By bypassing that character intro earlier, it gives you more room as a viewer to really invest yourself in the story. It's such a great way to adapt the series, man. I can't stress it enough. While I do think that the manga does a better job at portraying certain moments, I think the anime overall just does a better job at telling the story of Made in Abyss. I also think the CGI that was used for Belaf was pretty good all throughout, and I also loved his character introduction here. While the manga does a better job at truly showcasing how towering his figure actually is, the somber voice acting and the Atmos sound of this entire sequence was exactly what Made in Abyss is all about. A consistent unnervingness. I love this series, dude. And that ending was so much better in the anime compared to the manga. The tension was just so much higher with that musical score. Riko truly has an insane choice to make here, and it makes you wonder just how far she'll go for her friends. Pro tip, very far. She's a very, very caring person after all. But anywho, that's really all I wanted to say. Just an excellent episode overall, and I'm so proud of where this anime is going. I think Kinemas Citrus have only done phenomenal work so far, and I'm really keen for anime onlys to experience what's to come, and for manga readers to rejoice in both reactions for anime onlys, and in seeing certain moments fully animated. My favourite chapter and overall moment in Made in Abyss is actually within this arc, and I cannot wait to see it fully realised in anime. Hey, thanks so much for watching this video. If you want to support the channel, consider subscribing, and even checking out some of my other content. My ego is incredibly tiny, so the numbers actually just help validate my existence. I'll leave you on that despairing note. That's all from me. I shall see you all next week, even deeper in the Abyss.